For Father's Day, my daughter sent me this letter Father's Day morning. The sun had barely broken through the blinds when my wife screamed my name from the porch. I ran out thinking she'd tripped, but she was frozen holding a cream-colored envelope like it was burning her hand. "It's from Emily," she whispered. "Our daughter." We hadn't spoken in months. Her handwriting was still neat, careful, except for one thing. Right beneath my name, in shaky black ink, were 3 words that stopped my breath. "You deserve this." That was all. No greeting, no love, no signature. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and something small wrapped in tissue. When I shook it free, a house key fell out. My key, the one I'd hidden after she broke into our study last year. The paper said only, "You can't lock me out of what's already mine." Jessica covered her mouth, eyes wide with a kind of horror that only mothers know. Then she looked at me, voice trembling. "Will, look at the back. Look what she wrote." In red marker, across the page, "Check the safe." I didn't even make it to the hallway before the smell hit me. Something metallic, rotting. The door to my study was ajar. The safe was open. And inside, lying on top of my torn documents, was a single family photo. Our faces slashed clean through with a kitchen knife. That was the moment I knew my daughter hadn't just stopped loving me. She wanted to destroy me. For a long time, I stood there staring at that ruined photo inside the safe. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was something colder. Recognition. You never think your own blood would turn into your enemy. You tell yourself it's just a phase, a misunderstanding, a young woman's pride. But when you find a knife mark slicing through your own face in a picture, you stop pretending. Jessica sat on the edge of the couch, holding the torn envelope, whispering the same question over and over. "What happened to her, Will? What happened to our daughter?" I didn't answer, because I already knew. It hadn't happened overnight. It started quietly, the way cracks start in glass, almost invisible, until one day the whole pane shatters. I remember the last time Emily came to the house before everything fell apart. It was spring. The garden smelled of lilacs, the same way it had when she was a child running barefoot through the grass, chasing butterflies. Back then, she laughed easily. Now, every word out of her mouth was sharp enough to draw blood. She arrived without warning, sunglasses on, phone in hand, not a trace of warmth in her voice. "Dad, we need to talk about the property." That's how she said it. The property, not the house, not home. Jessica tried to make small talk, asked about the kids, but Emily brushed her off. Ryan, her husband, waited outside in the car, engine still running, like he couldn't stand to breathe the same air as us. I told her we'd already discussed it. The will was done. The house and the savings were secured for later, for everyone's future. She didn't like that answer. She leaned closer, eyes cold, and said, "You don't get to decide when later is. I'm drowning now." I'd heard that tone before. The practiced helplessness. The same plea disguised as moral duty. Every time I helped, she fell deeper. Every time I refused, she found new ways to twist the knife. Jessica tried to calm her down. Honey, your father's not against you. He just wants to make sure." "Make sure what?" Emily cut in. "That he dies before I see a cent?" The slap of that sentence hung in the air. I felt something inside me crack then. Not anger, grief. When she left that day, she didn't say goodbye. She just whispered to Ryan as they walked out, "He'll regret this." And now, standing in front of that open safe, I realized this was her version of regret. Her warning had just arrived. One key, one message, one shredded memory of what used to be family. I sat down at my desk, the same spot where I'd taught her to do homework when she was 10. The faint scratch marks from her old pencils were still there under the lamplight. That desk had seen everything. Birthdays, bills, and now betrayal. Jessica came in quietly, eyes red, voice barely steady. "She's angry, but she wouldn't." She stopped herself, as if the word hurt was too heavy to say. I looked up. Wouldn't what? Break in? Forge my signature? Steal from her own father? Her silence was answer enough. We'd forgiven so many things over the years. Missed payments, lies, tears that came right before another request for money. But this was different. This wasn't about need anymore. It was about control. Jessica finally asked, "What are you going to do?" I said nothing at first, because I wasn't sure. When your child turns on you, there's no manual. There's just instinct and pain, and both can lead you somewhere dark. That night I sat in the kitchen long after Jessica had gone to bed. The house felt foreign. Every creak sounded suspicious, every shadow too still. I kept thinking about the note. You can't lock me out of what's already mine. That line echoed in my head like a curse. Already mine, the house, the savings, the name on the documents, everything I had built from 40 years of work, she now believed she owned by birthright. Around midnight, I went back to the study and started sorting through the safe. The smell of metal and paper filled the air. Nothing seemed missing, but everything felt violated. At the bottom, under a stack of old tax forms, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small digital recorder. It wasn't mine. When I pressed play, there was only static. Then a faint click, followed by a voice. Emily's voice. He won't sign it willingly, but if we push hard enough, he'll fold like he always does. Then Ryan's voice, low and mocking. Don't worry, sweetheart. I've got friends who know how to make paperwork disappear. The rest was garbled, but I didn't need more. That single recording was enough to burn through any remaining denial. So that's what she'd been doing. Not just threats. Planning, forgery, collusion. For a long while, I just sat there in the dark, the recorder still in my hand, her voice still whispering from it like a ghost that wouldn't die. Then I set it down next to the broken photo, two relics of love and betrayal side by side. I looked at them until dawn began to push through the blinds, thin and cold. Jessica came downstairs, eyes swollen from crying. I told her everything, the key, the note, the recording. She listened in silence, then whispered, "We have to do something, Will, before she does worse." And for the first time I felt the answer clearly. "We will," I said. But not the way she expects. Because when a daughter tries to destroy her father with noise, the only weapon that wins is silence. I didn't sleep that night. The light in my study stayed on until morning, spilling through the hallway like a confession I couldn't take back. Jessica tried to rest upstairs, but every time the house creaked, I heard her stir. Silence had weight now. It pressed on the walls, heavy with something neither of us dared to name. The next day, Emily called. Not to apologize, she never did, but to perform. Her tone was syrupy, rehearsed, the kind she used when she wanted something wrapped in guilt. "Dad," she said, "I'm sorry about the misunderstanding, but you have to admit, you've been distant lately." Misunderstanding. That word alone almost made me laugh. If theft and threats were misunderstandings, then maybe hell was just a heated basement. I let her talk. She spoke of bills, of pressure, of how Ryan wasn't doing well mentally, and how I should show compassion as a father. Every sentence had the rhythm of a well-practiced script, one that always ended with me wiring money. But not this time. I kept my voice calm, slow, deliberate. "Emily," I said, "I've given you compassion your entire life. Maybe it's time you try self-respect." There was a pause. Long, sharp, then the sound of her breathing turning shallow. "You think you're teaching me a lesson?" she spat. "You're just proving why Mom pities you." And then the click. For a full minute, I stared at the silent phone. It was strange how something so small could carry so much venom. Jessica came in holding her coffee cup, both hands trembling. "She called you, didn't she?" "She did." "Did it go bad?" "It went honest," I said. We spent the rest of the morning in quiet motions, washing dishes that didn't need washing, rearranging drawers that didn't need rearranging. That's what grief looks like when you're too old to scream. It becomes routine. You clean what you can't fix. By noon, the first retaliation arrived. An email, anonymous but poorly disguised, accusing me of financial abuse, claiming I'd manipulated my daughter's inheritance, that I was unfit to manage my own estate. It was sent to my lawyer, my insurance provider, even my workplace's old HR office, a perfect storm of humiliation. The message ended with, "Justice will find greedy men, even if their blood hides them." No signature, but I didn't need one. The rhythm of the sentences, the drama, the moral superiority. It was her handwriting, translated into words. Jessica cried that night. Not loud sobs, just the kind that come quietly, from the soul, not the throat. "She's our daughter," she said. "We can't go to war with her." I wanted to believe that. But what do you call it when one side keeps drawing blood and the other keeps offering bandages? The next day, Ryan showed up. No call, no warning. He knocked once and walked straight into the living room like he still lived there. "Afternoon, Will," he said, smiling that lazy smile that always reminded me of debt collectors on daytime TV. I didn't offer coffee. He sat down anyway, spreading his arms on my couch like it was a throne. "Emily's a mess, you know. You've pushed her too far." I said nothing. He leaned forward. "She's been crying every night. You made her feel like trash. You could fix that in 10 seconds with a pen and a checkbook." That word again. Checkbook. It used to be my weapon for peace. Now it was theirs. "You done?" I asked quietly. He blinked. I said, "Are you done rehearsing?" That got him. He laughed once, short and ugly. "You think you're clever, old man. You forget who taught her how to play the game." He stood, buttoning his jacket like he was finishing business. "You'll see what desperate looks like when people have nothing left to lose." When the door closed behind him, Jessica exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "Will, he's dangerous." "No," I said. "He's stupid. But stupidity gets dangerous when you mix it with entitlement." That night, I opened my notebook, the same one I used to track retirement plans, and began a different kind of list. I titled it, "Things They've Forgotten I Still Remember." The loan I covered after Ryan's business collapse. The forged signature on the college loan form. The pawned watch from my father, the one that vanished after their last visit. The voicemail. Every line was another crack in the illusion of family. And yet, the strangest part was how calm I felt writing it all down. Like documenting a storm from inside a bunker. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was recording. That's how silence begins to turn into power. Days passed with no word. Then, on Thursday, a letter came. Official, stamped, legal. A notice of pending inquiry regarding alleged elder neglect, filed through the county's social service office. Someone had reported me. The complaint claimed I was showing signs of cognitive decline and should be evaluated for guardianship transfer. Guardianship. A polite word for take his money before he dies. Jessica nearly fainted when I showed her. "They can't do this, can they?" "They can try," I said. And that's when the shift happened. Not in her, but in me. Because up until that letter, I still believed this was about money. It wasn't. It was about punishment. Emily wasn't trying to survive. She was trying to break me, morally, socially, legally, piece by piece, until I'd begged to hand her everything just to stop the bleeding. That night, I sat outside on the porch, listening to the cicadas hum under the streetlights. I thought about the way she used to sit next to me as a little girl, tracing shapes on my hand, asking if love ever disappears. I told her back then, "No, sweetheart, it just changes shape." I never thought it could turn into this. I felt Jessica's hand on my shoulder. Her voice was soft, but firm in that way only long marriages teach you. You can't fight her with emotion, Will. She feeds on reaction. If you give her fear, she'll turn it into proof. You need to be smarter. That's when I realized something simple and terrifying. I'd been playing her game. She thrived on noise. I'd been giving her silence, but a passive kind, a silence of retreat. Now it had to become strategic. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, almost to myself, "All right, Emily, let's see what happens when silence starts keeping score." Inside, the house was quiet again. The broken photo was still on my desk, the recorder still beside it, two relics waiting for their moment to speak. And I knew exactly when they would. The first thing I did the next morning was move the broken photo off my desk. Not to forget, but to make space. Space to think, space to plan. I brewed coffee the way I always did. 2 scoops, no sugar. Routine anchors the mind when everything else tries to drift. Jessica hovered by the window, pretending to read but really just listening to the quiet. That's how you know a house is breaking, when silence becomes a shared language. "Are you going to call her?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "You'll have to eventually. When I'm ready." What I didn't say was that I was already talking to someone else. By 8:30, I was sitting in Margaret Holt's office downtown. She'd been our family lawyer for over 20 years. The kind of woman who could quote inheritance law like scripture, but still keep a rosary in her drawer. She looked at me over her glasses. "You sound like a man walking through fire, Will." "Feels more like drowning," I said. "Tell me everything." So I did. The key, the letter, the smell from the safe, the recorder, Ryan's visit. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen against a yellow legal pad. "This isn't about money anymore," she said. "It's control through chaos. She's creating noise, hoping you'll make a mistake." I nodded. "She's your daughter, but right now, she's also a liability. You need to stop reacting emotionally." "How?" "Through documentation. Evidence is the opposite of emotion." Those words stayed with me. Evidence is the opposite of emotion. I left her office with a folder full of forms and a mind sharper than it had been in years. I spent the next week cataloging everything. Phone calls, emails, even small details like times and tone. I stopped answering unlisted numbers. I stopped replying to guilt. Every silence became deliberate. Jessica tried to understand. "You're acting like a stranger," she said one evening as I sat typing notes into a locked file. "I'm protecting us," I said. "From Emily?" "From what Emily has become." That night, as she slept, I listened to the house breathe. Every tick of the wall clock felt louder, marking time between who we'd been and what we were becoming. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. This time, no handwriting, just a printed label with our address, and no return. Inside was a flash drive. No note. Jessica stood behind me as I plugged it in. The folder name, Confession. The first file was audio, static, then a woman's voice. Emily's. "If Dad won't listen, maybe other people will. Sometimes truth needs an audience." Then another voice. Ryan's. "You sure this won't backfire? He's old, he'll panic. They always do when you hit them where it hurts." I stopped the recording. Jessica whispered, "What is she doing?" "She's trying to push me into breaking the law," I said, "so she can prove I'm unfit." The realization didn't make me angry. It clarified everything. She wasn't just trying to destroy my reputation. She wanted legal control, guardianship, assets, the house, everything. That night, I drove back to Margaret's office with the flash drive. She didn't look surprised. "She's escalating," she said. "We need to go on record first. That way, when her claim arrives, you're already documented as the victim, not the suspect." I signed a formal report and gave her copies of the audio and the earlier voicemail. She looked at me, eyes tired but sharp. "Will, this will get uglier before it gets better. But you're doing the right thing. Right feels a lot like betrayal sometimes." She smiled sadly. "That's because you were raised to think loyalty means silence. It doesn't." Driving home, The city lights blurred through the windshield. I realized Margaret was right. Silence had always been my shield. Now it would become my weapon, but a lawful one. The next morning, I changed every password. Bank, email, even the security system. I created a hidden camera in the study, just in case. The small red light blinked quietly beside my books. It was the kind of insurance you never hope to use. That week, Emily went quiet. No calls, no messages. The calm before the next storm. Jessica tried to fill the air with normal things, talking about dinner, about the garden, about the neighbor's new puppy, but I could see the fear behind her words. Every small joy now came with an asterisk. Then Friday came. I was in the kitchen, trimming the last of the lilies, when the front door opened. Jessica's gasp told me everything. Emily stood there, same sharp cheekbones, same perfume she'd worn at her wedding, but her eyes were different. Cold, practiced, almost pitying. "Dad," she said softly, like a therapist greeting a patient. "You look tired." I didn't answer. "Can I come in? This isn't a good time." "It never is with you." She stepped closer, ignoring the boundary. "You've made everything harder than it needed to be. Ryan told me what you did. Recording us, spying, or treating us like criminals. Did he also tell you he threatened me in my own house?" She laughed once. "Threatened? You're paranoid." Her tone had that sugar-coated contempt that used to make teachers fall for her excuses. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. "These are medical evaluations. I think you should read them." The words blurred for a second before I understood. She was staging a cognitive assessment petition, claiming I was losing mental clarity. I handed the papers back without reading them. "You're wasting your time." "No, Dad. I'm saving yours." Her voice softened suddenly, almost tender. "You've worked hard all your life. You shouldn't have to worry about money or responsibility anymore. Let me take care of things." That was her game, rebranding greed as compassion. "Emily," I said quietly, "if you ever loved me, walk away now." She smiled, the kind of smile that hides a win. "Love is why I'm doing this." Then she left the folder on the counter and walked out. Jessica broke down the moment the car disappeared down the driveway. "What are we going to do?" I picked up the folder and threw it straight into the fireplace. "Nothing illegal," I said. "Just intelligent." That night, I sat in my office and began recording a video. Just me, the camera, and the truth. I spoke calmly, explaining every event, every piece of evidence, every motive. I mentioned names, dates, times. I uploaded it privately, time-stamped, and stored backups in the cloud and at Margaret's office. It wasn't for the public. It was for the future. Proof that I hadn't gone mad. Proof that silence could still tell the truth. Days later, the letter from the court arrived. A notice confirming the evaluation petition. Margaret handled the response, attaching all evidence and recordings. Within 48 hours, the court dismissed the case before it even began. Emily had overplayed her hand, but victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief with paperwork. Jessica stood in the doorway as I deleted the digital copy of her forged documents. "Do you think she'll stop now?" she asked. "No," I said. "But she'll slow down. People like her don't stop until silence becomes louder than their noise." Outside, the street was quiet again. Somewhere, a sprinkler hissed softly over the lawn, and for a brief second, the air smelled like the old days, like safety. But safety isn't a place anymore. It's a decision. That night, I made mine. From now on, every word, every call, every move would be deliberate, because I'd learned that in this kind of war, the smartest thing a father can do isn't to shout, it's to prepare. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and the shame, a small part of me whispered what Margaret had said on that first morning. Evidence is the opposite of emotion. It was time to prove it. The morning after the court's dismissal, the house finally felt breathable again. Jessica made pancakes, the way she used to when Emily was little. Thin, crisp edges, too much syrup. We sat at the kitchen table without speaking, listening to the sound of forks against porcelain. It was the first time in weeks that the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring, but it wouldn't stop. Jessica reached over and silenced it. We both pretended not to look at each other, but when the landline started ringing too, we knew ignoring wasn't an option. I answered. "Mr. Carr?" The voice was male, unfamiliar. "This is Officer Delaney from the County Police Department. We'd like to ask a few questions about a property report filed under your name." My pulse steadied. Not fear, just readiness. "What kind of report?" "Alleged break-in at your daughter's residence 2 nights ago." I almost laughed. "She filed that?" "Yes, sir. She claims you came to her home, entered without consent, and took personal documents." "Do you believe that?" A pause. "We just need your statement." Jessica pressed a hand to her mouth. I thanked the officer, promised to come down later. When I hung up, she whispered, "She's doubling down." "No," I said. "She's cornered." I drove to the station with the same calm I used to take to work every Monday morning for 30 years. The difference now was purpose. Officer Delaney turned out to be younger than my grandson's soccer coach. Fresh-faced, polite, slightly uneasy. He gestured toward the recording device. "This is just procedural, Mr. Carr." I told him everything. About the letters, the petition, the flash drive. When I mentioned Margaret Holt, his expression changed. "The lawyer?" "Yes. She has everything archived." He leaned back. "Then this won't take long." Before I left, he said quietly, "For what it's worth, sir. She's been calling here every day. Sounds angry more than scared." "Keep the recordings," I said. "They'll save you paperwork later." That was the first time I realized. The system she tried to use against me had started working for me instead. When I came home, Jessica was waiting by the window. "She called," she said. "She wants to come over. Says she needs to explain." "No," I said automatically. "She sounded small, Will. Maybe she's realizing what she's done." I wanted to believe that, I really did. But love had blinded us long enough. Still, I agreed. Maybe because I needed to see her face when truth hit. Emily arrived near sunset. The same car, the same perfume, the same restless tapping of her fingers on the steering wheel before stepping out. Every movement rehearsed, controlled. She didn't knock. She walked in. Jessica greeted her with trembling politeness. I stayed in the doorway of the living room. "Dad," she said softly. "I didn't mean for things to go this far." "Then why did you?" Her eyes darted away. "I thought, if I pushed hard enough, you'd understand how desperate things were. Desperate people ask for help. You filed legal lies?" She flinched. "You always twist things." I watched her closely. Beneath the mask of guilt, there was calculation. Her gaze scanned the room, settling on the shelf by my desk, on the small camera light blinking faintly red. She smiled sweetly, like a stage actress catching a cue. "Recording me now?" she asked. "Habit," I said. Her tone sharpened. "That's illegal without consent." "Not in my home, Emily. Not when I'm protecting evidence." The mask cracked just a little. She took a breath, then exhaled sharply. "You're sick. You've let Margaret poison you." "You did that yourself," I said quietly. Then came the tell. People like her always overplay their hand when they feel control slipping. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and started recording. "Let's make it fair then," she said. "Everyone gets a copy." I didn't move. She raised her voice just enough for the mic to catch. "This is what I've been dealing with. My father's paranoia, his obsession, his refusal to admit he needs help." That's when Jessica stepped forward. "Stop it, Emily. This isn't helping anyone." "Mom, please," she snapped. He's not well. You're just too scared to admit it. And that's when the front door opened again. Margaret stepped in. She wasn't expected. I'd called her that morning, asked her to drop by for coffee. The look on Emily's face when she saw her was worth every sleepless night. Margaret smiled, calm, professional. "Afternoon, Miss Carr." I was just about to share some updates. Emily's hand froze mid-recording. "What are you doing here?" "Protecting my client," Margaret said simply, "and ensuring that this conversation stays civil. You see, Miss Carr, it's no longer just family business. The Department of Fraud Prevention has opened a case review." Emily blinked. "For what?" "The forged insurance papers, the false guardianship claim, the audio manipulation." Color drained from her face. Jessica gasped softly. I said nothing. Margaret pulled a small envelope from her briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. "This is a cease and desist order. Any further contact outside legal channels will be considered harassment." Emily's voice cracked. "You can't do this to me." "You already did it to yourself," Margaret replied. For the first time, Emily looked at me, not with anger, but disbelief, like a magician whose trick had been stolen mid-act. "You planned this," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "because I stopped hoping you'd stop." Her phone was still recording, but her hand was shaking now. The same hand that once held mine when crossing streets, when drawing birthday cards, when pretending everything could be fixed with time. She turned toward Jessica. "Are you really going to let him do this?" Jessica's voice trembled, but her answer didn't. "I'm going to let him survive." That broke something. Emily's eyes filled, not with guilt, but fury. "Fine. You want a war? You'll get one." Margaret's tone stayed even. "Not a war, Miss Carr, just consequences." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Jessica sank onto the couch, hands shaking. Margaret packed her documents calmly. "She'll try one more move," she said. "They always do before silence wins." "What kind of move?" "Something public. Something meant to shame you." And she was right. 2 days later, it started. A social media post, long, dramatic, soaked in self-pity. "My father chose greed over love. He's being manipulated by lawyers. He's cutting his only daughter out of his life." Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. Sympathy rolling in from strangers who had no idea what truth looked like. Jessica cried when she saw it. I didn't. I just read every line carefully, saving screenshots, documenting timestamps. Each word was another thread she was spinning to hang herself. That night, I sat at my desk, turned the recorder back on, and spoke one sentence. "Justice doesn't shout. It signs." Then I began drafting a public statement. Not emotional, not defensive, just factual. I would not accuse. I would reveal. The next day, I uploaded a single post, 39 seconds of calm explanation. No anger, no names, just a photo of our old house, the title deed with my name, and a simple caption. Silence has its limits. Within hours, the tide turned. People began asking questions on her page. Wait, why would he have legal documents? Didn't she forge insurance papers? Why is there a court record with her name? The comment section became her courtroom. Jessica sat beside me, staring at the screen. Is this really how it ends? No, I said. This is how truth begins to breathe again. Later that night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. No greeting, no threats, just 2 words. I'm sorry. No signature, but I knew the rhythm of that shame. It was the first honest sentence she'd written in months. I didn't reply. Forgiveness isn't a message you send. It's a boundary you keep. I shut off the monitor, turned to Jessica, and said, she's unmasked herself. Now we finish the story properly, by surviving it. And as the house fell silent again, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. The war wasn't between father and daughter anymore. It was between truth and noise, and truth had finally learned how to speak quietly enough to be heard. I didn't sleep the night her apology email arrived. Not because it haunted me, because I didn't trust it. People like Emily never apologize without strategy. They confess only when they're building a new lie underneath. By dawn, I was already at my desk, scrolling through the messages that had flooded in overnight. Some were supportive. Some were cruel. But all of them had one thing in common: noise, the kind of chaos Emily thrived on. Jessica came down, robe tied tight, hair still damp from restless sleep. "Will," she whispered, "maybe this is over. Maybe that's her way of—" "No," I said softly. "It's her way of checking if I'm still watching." That's what guilt looks like when it's weaponized. It becomes curiosity. She wanted to see if I'd react. So I didn't. Instead, I did what she would never expect. I went quiet. But not the wounded kind of quiet, the surgical kind. For days, I posted nothing, answered no calls. I left her floating in uncertainty, where her manipulation couldn't breathe. And then, when she was sure I'd gone still, I started moving behind the curtain. First, I met Margaret. We sat in her office again, the morning light sharp through the blinds, dust motes drifting like old ghosts between us. "I want to make it official," I said. She nodded slowly. "You mean the will?" "Yes, and more." We rewrote everything, tightened the trust, separated assets, sealed the inheritance into an educational fund for the grandchildren only. No access for their parents, no loopholes, no emergency clauses. Margaret smiled as she typed. "Poetic," she said. "You're turning the very thing she fought for into something she can never touch." "It's not revenge," I said. "It's protection with purpose. That's what real justice usually looks like." When the documents were ready, she slid them across the desk for signatures. My pen moved without hesitation. The sound of ink scratching paper felt like the first deep breath after drowning. Jessica joined me at the notary's office that afternoon. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed, but her eyes were steady. "We're doing the right thing," she said. I nodded. For once, silence will mean safety. That night, after everything was notarized, scanned, and sealed, I wrote a short letter. Not to Emily, to Emma and Jake, my grandchildren. I told them stories about the house, about the swing set in the backyard, about how their mother used to fall asleep on the porch after running through sprinklers. I ended it with one line: "You will always have a home here, even if your mother forgets how to find it." I mailed it to Margaret for safekeeping, to be delivered on their 18th birthdays. Justice isn't only about punishment. Sometimes it's about preservation. Then came the counterstrike. Not loud, not public, just precise. 2 days later, Emily posted again. Another long caption, half confession, half accusation. She said I was isolating myself, that I was letting outsiders control family matters. She ended with, "He's not the man I grew up with." For the first time, she was right, because the man she grew up with tolerated manipulation. This one didn't. I forwarded the post to Margaret. "Leave it up," she said. "Every word strengthens your case. We'll file for defamation if she crosses the line." Then Margaret added, "There's a better way to end this, Will. Not in court, but in light. Truth spreads faster when it's quiet." That phrase stayed with me. A week later, the opportunity came. It was a small community event, our church's charity dinner. Jessica and I went every year. We hadn't planned to this time, but Margaret encouraged it. "Be seen," she said. "Normalcy is a weapon, too." When we arrived, I could feel eyes on us. Whispers floated about the drama, the posts, the rumors. People love tragedy when it's not theirs. Halfway through dinner, I saw Emily. She'd come too, uninvited, wearing that performative sorrow that fools the untrained eye. Ryan wasn't with her. She moved from table to table like a politician, collecting sympathy like currency. When she finally reached us, Jessica stiffened. Emily smiled faintly. "Dad, Mom, I didn't expect you here." "You never do," I said. Her tone shifted into that half-whisper she used to trap empathy. "I just wanted to say, this whole thing, it's gone too far. People are talking. I think we should show them we're okay." I studied her face. There was no remorse, just calculation. She wanted a public reconciliation, a picture to post, proof that her narrative still worked. I nodded slowly. "You're right." Her eyes widened, surprised. "I am?" "Yes. Let's show them the truth." I stood and raised my glass slightly. "Everyone," I said, voice calm but firm, "I want to thank you for your prayers. It's been a difficult season for my family, but difficult seasons have a way of showing us what's real." The room quieted. Emily froze, smile faltering. Jessica gripped my hand under the table. I continued. "When lies spread, light doesn't argue. It simply shines. I'm grateful for those who've seen past the noise." I looked at Emily then, not with anger, but something worse. Clarity. To my daughter I wish peace, but peace built on truth, not illusion. A few gasps. One long silence. Emily's hand shook as she set down her glass. Her smile died in front of everyone. I didn't humiliate her. I simply removed her mask. And that kind of exposure burns louder than shouting ever could. She left minutes later, face pale, whispers following her out the door like smoke. Jessica didn't speak until the drive home. "Will," she said softly, "that was cruel." "No," I said. "It was clarity. She needed to see what truth looks like when it doesn't flinch." That night, the first cracks began appearing in her public armor. Friends who'd supported her started deleting comments. One of Ryan's old partners posted a thread exposing their gambling debts. And then, like dominoes, her facade began to fall. But I didn't celebrate. Justice doesn't taste sweet. It tastes clean. I spent those days quietly, pruning the garden, reading, living without flinching. Jessica began smiling again, cautiously. Every sunrise felt like an apology from the universe. A week later, a certified letter arrived from the county. Emily and Ryan were under investigation for tax fraud and forged business statements, the same documents they'd once hidden under my name. Margaret called that afternoon. "You don't need to testify," she said. "Your evidence already did." I thanked her, but something inside me broke again, because I'd won, and it didn't feel like winning. Jessica found me that evening sitting on the porch, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. "She'll face charges," she said gently. "Yes. Do you feel better?" "No, just lighter." She touched my shoulder. "Maybe that's all we get. Not joy, just less weight." I nodded. She was right. The next day I received another email, shorter this time. "You didn't have to destroy us." I stared at it for a long moment before replying. "I didn't. You did. I just stopped rebuilding the ruins." Then I deleted her from my inbox, from my contacts, from the ghost architecture of my daily life. That night, I returned to my study and took out the cracked family photo. I didn't fix it. I simply placed it inside a new frame, one slightly larger, leaving a thin border of emptiness around the picture. A reminder that even broken things can have space to heal. When Jessica came in, I told her quietly, "It's done. The noise has finally eaten itself." She nodded, tears glinting softly under the lamplight. "Will," she said, "you didn't just survive her. You outgrew her." I smiled faintly. Maybe that's what justice really is. Growth without applause. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, steady, whispering. The house was silent again. But this time, silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. And somewhere deep down, beneath every wound and every weary breath, I heard the faintest echo of my own voice. Strong, certain, finally unshaken. Justice doesn't shout. It signs. It's strange how quiet life becomes when truth finally decides to show up. No explosions, no screaming, no music. Just silence. the kind that feels like air after a storm. For weeks I'd been waiting for the next move. Emily had gone dark online. Ryan too. The investigation had taken over. Tax fraud, forged filings, false declarations. Every lie she'd used against me had been recycled by her own actions. Poetic, if you believe in that sort of thing. I didn't call her. I didn't send lawyers after her. I just waited. Because justice, when it's real, doesn't run. It walks. And it always arrives on time. Margaret called one morning. "Will," she said, "the hearing's been scheduled." "For what?" "For the fraud case. They've requested your statement as the original owner of the documents." I took a slow breath. "Do I have to be there?" "You don't have to. But if you want closure, that's where it lives." Closure. A small word that weighs like a gravestone. Jessica didn't want me to go. "Let them deal with it," she said. "You've already lost enough." "I need to look her in the eyes," I said quietly. "One last time." The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and history. I'd worked hard all my life, but I'd never been inside one as a plaintiff, only as a man who paid his taxes on time. That morning, the marble floors echoed under every hesitant step. When I entered the chamber, Emily was already there. Black blazer, hair pulled tight, makeup hiding the sleeplessness under her eyes. Ryan sat beside her, pale, jittery, chewing his thumbnail like a child. She didn't look at me, not once. But her body language said enough. Crossed arms, guarded throat, controlled breathing, all signs of someone rehearsing composure. Margaret sat next to me, her folders stacked in neat order. When the clerk began reading charges, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired, like I'd been carrying someone else's mistake for too long. Forgery, tax evasion, misrepresentation of property ownership, fraudulent attempt to claim guardianship under false pretenses. Each word was a hammer. Each count another echo of what I'd refused to see years ago. Emily's attorney tried to soften it. "She's been under emotional distress, Your Honor. This was not malicious, it was desperation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Desperation doesn't falsify signatures." When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. The microphone crackled once, then steadied. "Your Honor," I said, "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for clarity." I saw Emily's jaw tighten. I continued, calm and even. "For months, my daughter claimed I was unstable. She called me controlling, manipulative, unfit to manage my own affairs. She told the world I was cruel, and I let her. Because I thought silence would protect her. I was wrong." The courtroom was silent. Even the air felt like it was listening. I learned that silence only works when the other side has shame. When they don't, silence becomes a stage for their lies. So I decided to give my truth a voice. Margaret placed a small USB drive on the evidence table. The recordings, the voicemails, the phone calls, the confession from her own mouth. The judge nodded. "Proceed." And then the room filled with Emily's voice. "If Dad won't sign it willingly, we'll make him. He folds when you push hard enough. No one will believe him anyway." The sound of her laughter after that last line, brittle, proud, broke the oxygen in the room. When the clip ended, the silence that followed was brutal. I didn't look at her. I just said softly, "That's all I have." The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Carr, thank you. You may sit." Emily's lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the table, unfocused, like someone watching her own house burn from the inside. The judge ordered a recess. As people filed out, she finally spoke. Just one sentence, barely audible. "Was it worth it?" I turned to her, met her eyes for the first time in months. "No," I said, "but it was necessary." After that day, things unraveled fast. Ryan took a plea deal to avoid jail. Emily's accounts were frozen. Their home went up for sale. But the strangest part wasn't the loss. It was her silence. No calls, no emails, nothing. Just absence. Jessica asked often if I missed her. I told her the truth. I miss who she used to be, but that person's been gone a long time. A month later, I got a letter, handwritten, shaky. The first real thing from her since all of it began. Dad, I thought taking control would fix everything. I thought if I could manage the money, I could finally stop feeling small. But I see now, all I did was prove how small I really am. I'm sorry. You don't have to forgive me, just don't erase me. I read it twice, then a third time. Then folded it neatly and put it in the same drawer as the broken photo and the old recorder. Jessica found me sitting there. Will? She wrote. Her eyes softened. Will you answer? No, I said. Not yet. Some apologies have to age before they mean something. 2 weeks later, the local paper ran an article about the case. Nothing sensational, just facts. The title read, Family Fraud Case Ends in Quiet Resolution. Quiet. That word again. The reporter had quoted one of the court officials who said, Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's just right. That sentence felt like an epitaph for everything we'd lived through. The following Sunday, Jessica and I went back to church for the first time in months. People stared, whispered, smiled awkwardly. The pastor welcomed us with a nod. His sermon that day was about forgiveness, but he never said who deserved it. Maybe that was the point. After the service, as we stepped outside into the sunlight, I saw her, standing across the parking lot near the oak tree. Emily. No camera, no makeup, no husband. Just her, small, uncertain, almost invisible in the morning light. She didn't move closer. Neither did I. Our eyes met for a second that felt like years, and in that silence, no words were needed. Forgiveness wasn't ready, but recognition. That was enough. Jessica squeezed my hand. Are you okay? Yes, I said. For the first time, I think I am. That evening, I sat at my desk again. The cracked photo stood in its new frame, beside a sealed envelope. The legal trust papers, finalized and safe. The house was still, the air soft. I picked up my pen and wrote a final entry in my notebook. Today, the truth stood in court, and it didn't need to shout. It didn't even need to win. It just needed to exist long enough to breathe. I closed the notebook, locked it away, and opened the window. Outside, the world smelled like rain. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. It sounded like hope, fragile but alive. Jessica came in carrying 2 cups of tea. You wrote something again? Just a note, I said. She smiled. Maybe one day you'll publish it. No, I said softly. It's not a story. It's a warning that turned into a prayer. We drank in silence, watching the clouds move. When thunder rolled somewhere far off, she leaned against my shoulder. Do you think she'll ever come home? I don't know, I said. But I'll keep the light on. Not for her to find the house. For her to remember there's still light. The rain began then. Soft and steady, washing the dust off everything it touched. And in that sound, I finally understood something I'd resisted for too long. Justice isn't the opposite of love. It's the part of love that refuses to die quietly. That night, before turning off the lamp, I looked at the broken photo one last time. The crack across our faces still gleamed faintly under the glass, but it no longer looked violent. It looked honest. I whispered to the empty room, Justice doesn't shout. It breathes. Then I turned off the light. And for the first time in years, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. It's been 3 months since the court closed the case. 3 months since the last headline faded, the neighbors stopped whispering, and our mailbox finally filled with something other than legal letters. The house feels different now. Not bigger, not emptier, just clearer. Like someone cleaned the windows and let reality in. Jessica waters the garden again. She hums while she works. That same old tune she used to sing when Emily was still small enough to nap in the sunlight. I sit on the porch most mornings, coffee in hand, notebook beside me. There's peace in repetition, I've learned. Not because it forgets, but because it teaches the body to live again. We don't talk much about Emily. Her name floats in the air sometimes, like a song we once loved but can't listen to anymore. Jessica still keeps her photo on the hallway table. She dusts it every Sunday, careful not to touch the frame too long. Once I asked her why she keeps it there. She said, because forgiveness isn't the same as erasing. It's remembering without reopening the wound. I didn't argue. She was right. She usually is. A week ago, a letter came, not from Emily this time, but from a child. Crayon handwriting, blue ink smudged at the corners. Dear Grandpa, Mommy says you like puzzles. Can I send you one? Love, Emma? I read it 3 times. The words tilted something inside me I thought had calcified. Jessica cried when she saw it. I didn't. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I felt too much. That small letter was the only thing in months that didn't carry blame. No threats, no guilt. Just a child's curiosity. We wrote back together that night. Dear Emma, I do like puzzles. They remind me that even when pieces look lost, they still belong somewhere. I'd love one of yours. Jessica slipped a small Polaroid inside the envelope. Our garden in bloom. Sunlight falling through the roses. Something gentle, she said, so she knows what peace looks like. The next morning, I took a walk through town. People nodded, smiled, asked polite questions. Some pretended they hadn't read the papers. Others said things like, "Good for you, Mr. Carr. Justice served." I smiled, but I didn't correct them. Because justice isn't served like coffee or praise. It's endured. When I passed the bakery near Main Street, Mrs. Walker, a woman who's known us since Emily was in middle school, stepped outside and handed me a loaf of bread. "On the house," she said, "for your courage." I wanted to tell her it wasn't courage. It was survival disguised as patience. But instead, I just thanked her. Sometimes people need to believe in simple words to make sense of complicated truths. That evening, I found Jessica sitting in the living room, staring at the phone. "She called," she said quietly. "Emily?" She nodded. "Didn't leave a message, just silence." Then she hung up. I didn't ask for more. We sat there for a long time, both of us listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the life that refused to stop moving forward. Finally, Jessica whispered, "Do you think she's sorry?" "I think she's lonely," I said. "Is that enough?" "For now, it has to be." Because redemption doesn't come all at once. It's not a single act. It's a long walk through your own mistakes until you learn to breathe again. Later that week, Margaret called. "The trust is finalized," she said. "Emma and Jake's fund is protected. Everything's in order." "Thank you," I said. "You sound lighter." "I am," I said. "But not because I won, because I stopped fighting battles that don't deserve a winner." She laughed softly. "I'll steal that line for my next client." "Tell them to pay you in patience," I said. "Patience costs more than gold," she replied. When the call ended, I sat there a while, watching the shadows stretch across the carpet. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a phone call, not an apology, not justice. Just the next sunrise. One night, while Jessica was asleep, I went to the study and took out my old recorder. I pressed play, expecting the usual lakum. Static, fragments of voices, evidence that once mattered, but I'd erased them months ago. The device clicked once, then played nothing but silence. And for the first time, that silence felt complete. Not empty. Complete. I recorded something new that night, just a single line. Silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom that stopped explaining itself. I left it on the desk. Not for anyone else, just for me. A reminder that I didn't need proof anymore. Yesterday, Jessica found an old sweater of Emily's in the attic. It still smelled faintly of lavender detergent, the same kind she used in college. Jessica folded it neatly, placed it in a box, and labeled it, "For Emma." She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. We both knew it was our quiet way of keeping the bridge open. Not rebuilt, not crossed, just there. This morning, I went out early to prune the roses. The thorns caught my hand, drew a small bead of blood. I smiled. Because even beauty has edges, and that's what makes it real. Jessica came out with 2 cups of coffee. "Still fighting the roses?" "They started it," I said. She laughed, the sound of something healing. We sat there together, the morning sun slow and kind. The mailbox flag was up again. Another letter, maybe from Emma, maybe from no one. It didn't matter. The world was quiet, and that was enough. I don't know if redemption means we all end up happy. Maybe it just means we stop bleeding on the people who didn't cut us. Maybe it means learning that love isn't ownership, and family isn't proof. It's endurance. When I look back now, I don't see villains and victims. I see people lost inside their own noise, mistaking control for care. And I see an old man who finally learned that the most powerful word in the world is enough. That night, before bed, I opened my notebook again. On the last page, I wrote 5 words: peace through power, boundaries through love. Then I closed it, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the dark. Justice doesn't shout. It signs. And sometimes, it also forgives. Autumn arrived quietly this year. The air smelled different, softer, almost forgiving. The trees behind our house turned gold, then pale, then bare. It felt like watching time apologize. I spend my mornings now at the window with coffee, reading the paper, writing small things that no one will ever publish. Jessica calls it his therapy with no therapist. She's not wrong. Every once in a while, I still think about Emily. Not the chaos, not the courtroom, just her laugh when she was 10, the way she'd tilt her head when she lied about eating the last cookie. Those memories aren't poison anymore. They're just echoes. Sometimes I imagine she's out there trying again, rebuilding, learning, maybe even healing. I hope she is, because I finally understand. Love doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means wishing someone peace without needing to watch them find it. Last week, another letter arrived. Short, careful handwriting. Dear Grandpa, Mommy says we might visit for Christmas. I don't know if we can, but I hope so. I liked your photo of the garden. Mom says it used to be hers. Maybe one day it can be everyone's again. I read it slowly, twice. Jessica stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. We didn't cry. We didn't smile either. We just breathed. Together, steady, quiet. That's what healing sounds like when it's real. We wrote back that same evening. Dear Emma, the garden is still here. Roses bloom, even after storms. If you ever come, I'll show you how to prune them so they keep growing without hurting themselves. Jessica added a line in her handwriting. Bring your mother. The door isn't locked. It's just waiting to open the right way. The next morning, I walked out into the yard, dew still clinging to the grass. The sunlight cut through the trees in clean, forgiving lines. I looked back at the house, the same one I built with my hands, the same one that held every argument, every dinner, every lesson. For the first time, it didn't feel like a battleground. It felt like home again. Inside, Jessica was humming softly while folding laundry. The air smelled like coffee and peace. And in that small, unremarkable moment, I realized justice had already done its job. It hadn't punished. It had purified. I sat down, picked up my recorder, the same one that once held proof of betrayal, and pressed record. My voice was calm, low, measured. To anyone listening, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you've loved someone who used your kindness as currency. Maybe you're scared that standing up for yourself means losing them. I know that fear. But listen, silence isn't surrender. It's the breath before clarity. And clarity is what saves you. I paused, hearing the small static hum of the recorder, like the world was leaning closer. Justice doesn't shout. It waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't look like revenge. It looks like peace. I stopped the recording, smiled faintly, and whispered one more line. Not for her, not for me, but for whoever might need to hear it. You can heal and still have boundaries. You can forgive without reopening the door. That evening, the sky turned amber, the kind of color that makes even regret look gentle. Jessica came out to the porch with 2 mugs of tea. "Ready for your next chapter?" she asked. "Already living it?" I said. We sat in silence, the soft hum of crickets rising, a dog barking somewhere down the road. No drama, no fear, just a story finally allowed to end. When the night settled, I looked at the camera on my desk, the one I'd used to record that last message. And I thought about all the people out there who might be trapped in the same kind of quiet war I once lived. The fathers, the mothers, the sons, the daughters, the ones trying to choose between peace and pride. And I realized something simple, something I wish I'd known earlier. Stories like mine aren't just told to remember. They're told to remind. So if someone out there needs to hear this, if you've ever been broken by your own blood and built yourself back anyway, you understand. Leave a comment. Share your story. Because silence becomes lighter when it's shared. And if you believe that justice doesn't have to roar, that it can simply breathe, stay with us. There are more stories here. Not about hatred, but about healing. About people who learned that the softest voice in the room can still carry the truth. Subscribe, not for drama, but for redemption. Because every day someone's story finds its way home, and maybe next time, it will be yours.